This is an informational session to get to know a little bit more about EB5. My name is Eren Çiçekdağ, Managing Director of Operations at Golden Gate Global. Golden Gate Global is a regional center in EB5 terms. We are a licensed investment firm in general terms to raise and pool EB5 funds and place it into eligible projects. So today our goal is to be able to talk about EB5, kind of basics of it, what is it, and also how individuals, especially the ones who are in the US with another visa type, can take advantage of the new law of EB5 and what we can do together. Today our panelist is my fellow colleague, Rohit Abiloya, and very distinguished EB5 attorney, Rohit Kapuria. I will let them to introduce themselves and we'll just dive in. Just a reminder, this is a recorded session and we will make the recording link available to participants and other attendees. Thank you. Rohit, why don't you introduce yourself? Go ahead.
My name's Abhinav. I am the Director of Global Business Development at Golden Gate Global. I used to be an EB5 attorney, and then I moved to the regional center side back in 2017. Up to you, Rohit.
I think you failed to say that you're a recovering attorney. So my name is Rohit Kapuria, and for those of you who have taken the time away from the Brazil-Korea match, thank you very much. It was a very interesting first half. So let's see what happens with that. But beyond that, I'm a partner at the law firm of Saul Ewing, Arnstein and Lair. We have 17 different offices and about 400 different attorneys. So EB5 is something that we highly specialize in and very pleased to be here.
Fantastic. So let's get started on this quickly on EB5. Rohit, what is EB5 and how does it differ from, in general, similar kind of visa types? Especially for the folks on the line today who mostly are people that are currently in the US with another visa type and interested in learning more about EB5.
Sure. EB5 is an employment-based application. So most of our attendees may be familiar with EB1, 2, and 3. EB4, for those not familiar, is for religious workers, and EB5 is the entrepreneurial program. It's been around for 30 plus years. It is a fantastic program that has helped thousands of applicants basically self-petition. The primary difference from what you may be familiar with is an EB5, even though it's employment-based, it's basically self-petition. So unlike EB2, 3, and 1, where you are reliant on an employer, either in the tech space or some other space, in EB5, you are not. It really is something that you take on within your own hands, and you essentially create the path for yourself towards the green card.
Very nice. And so maybe, Abi, just like this program in terms of its creation, could you just talk a little bit about when it was created and who's who in this industry? So we are a regional center, there's an immigration attorney, etc. Could you kind of give the lay of the land for the attendees for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So EB5 program has been around for a while now, since 1990. And then, so it involves 90% plus of the applications filed under the EB5 program are done through the regional center route. A very small percentage is direct. Now, in a regional center setting, the way investment takes place is it's a fund model. It's a very hands-off approach to EB5 where EB5 investors invest in a limited partnership, which is formed by the regional center and managed by a regional center. Funds go into an escrow account, and from there, usually as a loan, they are deployed in a project. They are given to a borrower. The way we do it at Golden Gate, it's secured debt, and there is a loan term of 5 years, which can be extended by 2 one-year extensions. And we manage the funds for the next 5 to 7 years. We keep a track of the spending because EB5 is not only about investment, it is about American job creation. So we keep track of the spending, which results in job creation, and then provide those reports to attorneys like Rohit here, who can then file application for removal of conditions for his clients.
So maybe, Rohit, can you just talk a little bit about the job creation aspect, because that's the core of this program. And when it comes down to job creation, does the investor need to do anything in this program? What is this kind of a private offering entail in terms of the overall documentation that support this job creation and other qualifications that the investors will see?
Sure. So to answer that question, maybe it's I'll touch on what Abhi mentioned, which is the 90+% that go into the regional center. There are essentially two different types of EB-5. EB-5 number one is a self-petition basis where the entrepreneur decides they want to start their own business and they want to fund it and they want to create the 10 full-time W-2 employment, which is extremely complicated. And mind you, in my career, I've done a number of those, and that has a very large set of challenges. Or number two, the investor goes the more fundamentally preferred route, which is they work with the regional center and they essentially treat it like a private equity offering. So the investor goes into a fund. The fund is raising, let's say, $20 million. Or if we want to keep the math, let's just make the math even a little easier. It's raising $16 million at $800,000 an investor. That fund takes the capital and then it basically lends it downstream to a borrower entity or job creating entity. Majority of the projects tend to be in the real estate space, which Abhi will touch on later. But essentially, what the primary goal is that underlying borrower is going to utilize the capital to create American jobs. So whether you're doing a direct EB-5, which is a self-petition by yourself, or whether you're doing the regional center development, you have to create 10 jobs per investor. The primary difference between the regional center and the self-petition model is, unlike the self-petition where you create W-2 jobs, in the regional center model, we're counting indirect and induced jobs that stem from economic development. So as long as we build the development, if it's real estate, you are going to get the construction jobs. And therefore, at the end of the day, the investors will get their underlying green card. And so the primary motivation for a lot of people is that they will go into these type of developments, and a regional center such as Golden Gate Global takes on that responsibility. You guys, as Golden Gate Global, will track all the job creation. You will spend the money. You would float the funds down. You will do all the necessary appropriate elements that are required under the EB-5 program. And the investor remains a passive investor. You provide them the reports. They have their attorney file the application. And the job creation is fundamentally that of the borrower's responsibility.
Just to add to what Rohit said there, I think one advantage of working with a regional center versus direct is that we have more flexibility in job creation in the sense that it's based on spending. Whenever that spending takes place, before the filing of the application, around the time when the application was filed, or much later, as long as it's, I-829, like even for that, you get an extension of a year. So there's so much flexibility that regional centers enjoy, and in terms of creating those jobs. And also the timeline is like, you can get an extension for it, and it's just based on indirect spending as well, that there is a lot of safety with respect to job creation in a regional center model.
And Abhi, one of the questions when we posted this webinar, one of the questions we received was, why real estate? So because there are other programs out there, golden visa programs in Europe, etc. People invest in a residential unit, for example, and in return, they get a permanent residency out of it. US program is different. EB-5 is different. It's a job creation program. Then what is the relevance to real estate, and why do people see always real estate projects when it comes to EB-5 regional center offerings?
I think it goes back to our thing about job creation. US didn't want to come across as a nation that's pay to play. You invest the capital and you buy a passport. So they ended up linking American job creation to EB5 investment. Now, if you talk about other nationalities where you can just buy a passport by buying a condo in Portugal or investing in a fund and not create jobs, that's easy. In US, if you buy a condominium or a single family home, it is not considered a job creating activity. As a result, you end up investing in a construction project. Now, real estate is the most popular because it is also the most common type of construction that goes on everywhere. So they're easy to find. Due diligence is easier. And whenever in this program, under the EB5 program, people have stepped outside the box and tried to do something cute like, alternate energy or some kind of like related to entertainment or running restaurants or something where operational jobs come into play, it gets riskier. So I like to use the word boring. At Golden Gate, we are very boring. We like to do the same thing again and again because I guess that's what we are good at and it's worked for 11 years. So why change it?
Great. Well, not all our projects are boring. I mean, we financed the Sacramento Kings. It was the basketball stadium. It was fun. But regardless. So, Rohit, what does the immigration attorney do in very kind of a concise term? So I'm interested in EB5. I see all these kind of projects, etc. But when do I come to you? Who are you? What do you do for me versus the regional center?
Sure. So what I typically tell investors is you want the immigration attorney at the ground level. While the investor is looking at projects and doing his or her own diligence on where they want to go, where they want to invest their money, the important facet is having that immigration attorney basically working with them in parallel. The idea is it takes a while to source the capital that the investor is going to put in. In general terms, I advise most clients that they should expect it takes anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. This is assuming the client actually has semi-liquid capital and is not actually trying to sell some asset or real estate that is not that liquid. And they want to work with the attorney to actually source the entirety of that capital that's going to be invested into the EB5 Regional Center Fund. The goal is every single dollar that we put in, we have to do some sort of forensic trail. Now, it becomes a question of, well, how far back do I go? How many tax returns do I need to look at? How many bank statements? Do I need 10 years bank statements, 15 years? A lot of that just depends. And so what the attorney does with the investor is as they're reviewing the various different projects on the market, they're getting to know you guys, they're talking about all the Golden Gate Global projects, they're working with someone like me to, in tandem, worry about the fundamentals of where the money came. They bought a piece of property in 2018, they did a refinance in 2020, took the money out, ended up deposited into some sort of fund. They, exited the fund, then they again went into something else. That whole forensic process, that's what we have to do.
Is this the only time that the investor has to work? Is this a passive investment? Is this an active investment? Do they have to really be hands-on? Or
no?
The source of path of funds, is it? Go ahead.
That's the most active. That is definitely the most active. I tell clients is, once we file the 526, then just expect quiet time, right? You get to that, finality, and then all of a sudden it's just quiet for the next few months. You're not talking to me as much. Maybe you've hated me by the time we're done with this because I made your life hell and gotten all these statements, but then there's just quiet. And we don't really need to talk as much after that because all you have to do as the investor is maintain your residency once you get it, right? Don't commit any felonies. Don't do anything dumb. Make sure you maintain residency. The basic things that you will have to do, whether you're a green card holder under EB123 or whether you're under EB5, but that's about it. No more active involvement.
Got it. And Abhi and Rohit, both of you, I think let's go to the meat of this conversation, which is who is this program for? Like, there's a significance of the timing that we're talking about this EB-5 right now. There's a lot of things are changing in the economy in the US. There's a lot of shifting, especially in the tech realm, that is kind of shifting. There are layoffs, there are kind of considerations of restructurings, and there are a lot of people who are visa holders in these entities. They are various like distinguished professionals who do their jobs greatly, but then now all of a sudden they have to worry about this aspect. So can EB-5 help them? Is this a good opportunity for H-1B holders or F1 students who are about to finish school, but now the job market is kind of shrinking in some areas? Is there kind of a good segue for them to look into EB-5 and maybe continue their presence here in the US in a more secure way?
In my opinion, EB-5 is for every non-immigrant who wants to settle in the United States long term. If someone's aim is to just be here for a couple of years, experience the lifestyle, the work culture, and go back to another country or go back to their home country, EB-5 is not for them. But for someone who moves here, wants to live and work here, settle here permanently, wants the kids to go to school here, EB-5 is for them. Now, what that ends up being usually is people on F1 visa, international students, professionals on H-1B and L-1 visas, and entrepreneurs on E-2 visas. So it's for any and everyone who wants to live and work in the United States, if not permanently, but for a long duration, for a significant part of their life.
And how about the timing? Because when we talk about this kind of, again, this changes in economy, is this timing-wise a wise decision? Can it really help? Because there's a new measure that is kind of added on to the EB-5 program with this 2022 Act of EB-5, which is now you can do a concurrent filing. Could you or Rohit talk a little bit about that and what it means for folks who happen to be in the US with a valid visa today and would like to kind of change gears?
I'll take that. So it really depends on what sort of visa status you're on, right? If you're on F1, and let's assume you're an Indian national, I'm just using that as an example, and you're looking at your options. You're going to graduate. Maybe you have STEM, maybe you don't have STEM OPT. You'll get 1 year or 3 years total job creation, or you are on EB2, EB3, and you have a priority date of January 2017, when the current priority date is April of 2012. The advent of the adjustment of status is a remarkable benefit that we never had before. The idea being, we have the investor file the petition. They are here on a temporary basis, either on the F1 or they're on OPT or they're on EB2, EB3. And we immediately apply for a concurrent adjustment of status. So that means we apply for 4 things. We apply for the EB-5 benefit, we apply for the work authorization, we apply for the EAD card, and then we apply for the concurrent green card. The concurrent green card and the initial EB-5 application, which is called an I-526E, those sit on the shelf at USCIS. However, the work authorization and the travel immediately proceed. We are seeing that work authorization is currently taking somewhere around 5 to 6 months, and the travel authorization is taking somewhere around 13 months. So the idea, if someone files an EB-5 application on January 1st, 2023, they would be eligible to get work authorization sometime in the early summer of 23, and they would be eligible to travel sometime at the end of 23 or early part of 24. The travel, assuming that they're not otherwise here on an H-1B. If you get on H-1B L1, there's some other considerations where you have dual intent. But if you're here on OPT or F1, you have sort of a short lock-in period that you have to account for. But
go ahead. No, I was just going to give an example. For example, let's say I work in Silicon Valley. I am an H-1B holder originally from India, and my EB-2 is forever, and I'm just waiting right now. And I hear there's a restructuring going on, and I'm a little bit kind of worried about that. Or I just got laid off in this kind of a general sense. Between now and when I can start working, regardless of my kind of a visa status or my dependency on the employer, when is it?
So if we're in that scenario and either you've been late, let's just take scenario one. You are hearing about the restructuring and you want to do something about it. Follow the I-526 EB-5 path, and let's get you in with an application file. Take matters into your own hand. You have your protective gear. And then go ahead and file so you get your EAD and your advance parole. The way I would look at it in that particular standpoint is your EAD, when you get it, it's like an emergency credit card. Keep it in your back pocket. You don't actually ever need to use it. Continue working for your employer. If, God forbid, something does go wrong with your employment, or if you want to port over to a different employer, let's say a startup, and there's no ability for you to port your H, authorization that gives you that sudden freedom. If you also just want to take a break, you're worn out, you've been working and toiling and sweating with a very large employer for the last so many years, and you just need a 2-month break, great. You've got that EAD. It doesn't have that implication that you must use it within 60 days. And it doesn't also have the implication you have to have an employment before you leave. You are pending adjustment. So the amount of flexibility you have, it's tremendous. If you have been laid off, and we're dealing with some of these unfortunate cases where we have some tech employees that were recently laid off, you've got that 60-day short window. We need to spring into action. And that's what we've done with some folks. We've sprung into action, we've filed the applications for them, and now they're pending adjustment, and they're just waiting for that EAD to come through so that they can go find another employment. But the advantage for them is they don't have that time pressure of that 60-day window that they would have had otherwise.
Right. So I guess once you file an AOS, and even though your underlying status expires, you don't have to leave the United States. And that's what the laid off employees are dealing with right now, right? Because I guess the biggest disadvantage of a sector layoff, like the entire tech sector laying off people, Meta, Twitter, Amazon, once you get fired under normal circumstances from Twitter, you would go to Meta and Amazon. But now everyone's laying off. There's a hiring freeze. Everyone has 60 days to find an alternate employer, or they leave United States. I guess the biggest advantage of AOS for them right now, apart from the fact that EAD will come sometime in the future, is the fact that they can actually live in the United States, because it's not only about a paycheck. Their kids are going to school. Leaving US means that their kids would have to be taken out of the school. They lose a school year. So it's much more serious than, losing a paycheck, which in itself is a very big deal.
But Abhi, the entire process is not completely risk-free, right? I mean, okay, this is a great opportunity for these folks, and maybe they have liquidity, maybe they can just jump on this, but there is fright about the program or anything because, I'm going to invest. What is happening to my money? Or am I really going to get my green card out of this process for sure? Is there any kind of a guarantees? And how does the regional center or the project kind of make sure that the investor's petition is safe? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, a general comment about immigration, right? Nothing is for certain. Nothing is guaranteed. And the same is true about the job market. I mean, I moved here a decade ago for my master's in law, thinking I'll settle in the United States. Even after graduating from a decent law school, getting licensed in New York did not guarantee a job. But it was an investment, going to law school in the United States. I think about EB5 also, it's the same thing. Nothing is guaranteed in terms of you will get a green card 100%. But what you can do, just like education, you go to a good college to improve your chances. You know, if you go to an Ivy League or a top 20 law school, the likelihood of getting employed in the United States, making a good career is really high. The same you do in EB5. You go, don't experiment with your immigration. You go with people who have a track record of not only getting you a green card, but also of repayment of capital. These are some things that should be part of everyone's due diligence. Like track record doesn't talks about the past. It doesn't mean future success, but it talks also about the intent of the organization you're investing with. That they've done this in the past, they've been able to repay capital, and that's where the intent comes into play. So I think that's definitely a very important part, at least for me it was, when I represented clients with regional centers.
But Rohit, now the new law actually adds on some additional measures that may actually help investors even more. Because again, one of the questions I got was, well, we hear that EB5 could be fraudulent, money could just go anywhere. There are a lot of investors who got burned. There are stories about it. How, in addition to the due diligence about the project and the attorney, et cetera, and choosing a boring regional center or a project, what is it out there that now protects them in addition to their own?
So I get this question. The one thing I would like to say on this, and I've actually had this with reporters, is fraud in EB5 has accounted for less than 1% of all the EB5 projects, right? And the unfortunate element is that that's what gathers the media attention. This is a program that has created well over 350,000 jobs across the US. It's raised in excess of almost $50 billion. And it's been around for 30 years. So it is a very strong program, and it creates a lot of jobs, and thousands of individuals have benefited. What the EB5 Reform Integrity Act, the RIA of 2022 does is it puts in a tremendous amount of measures, which are very, very painful for regional centers and attorneys alike. Trying to figure out what we need to do to structure an offering and put it out in the market, it's intense. The government wants, basic example, they want biometrics done on every single person involved at the regional center route to the EB5 fund route. They want to know who you are. They want to make sure that nobody with any taint of any sort, bankruptcies, SEC violations, anything of that nature is going to be involved. So they do the background checks. They want reporting that's going to be done on the project and as well as on the EB5 fund on an annual basis. But what they were previously requiring, they've now, heightened the requirements. They want the funds to be kept in separate accounts, and they want us to track how every single dollar goes through. And so a very simple example is it's indicated in the RIA, when the investor puts the money in an escrow account, it needs to be a separate account. From the escrow account, it comes into the fund account. That needs to be a separate account. It needs to flow down to the borrower. That also needs to be a separate account. So this idea being, by the time the capital is spent, which becomes a big pain for the borrower, they've had to track how that money flowed. So the idea is, by the time all of this is said and done, the investor flow is very clear. Now, the other thing they've even required, which I know Golden Gate Global has been doing this for years, but not everyone was doing this, was they require a fund administrator. And they want a third party who's overseeing things that the regional center fund is doing, so that you've got this joint signature before any money is dispersed to the borrower. The fund signs it, and then the fund administrator signs it. So those checks and balances are providing a good amount of integrity, and it's something that we're all very, very excited about, outside of course, banging our head on the wall trying to figure out, what all of these requirements are.
But these are all, one, to protect the investors, obviously, and two, make it more accountable for the entire industry, reducing the risk for everyone. And they're not much different from what SEC or FINRA requires other investment firms do as well, the registered firms do. So I think this is a step towards the right direction. And I think investors who are interested in going in will feel more comfortable about it. Just to add to your point, what we have been doing at Golden Gate Global from the minute that their funds go into an escrow account and considered first invested until they get it back, there's always a reporting line in several layers, not just on the fund manager level, not on the escrow bank level, not only on fund administrator level, but even when the project uses the funds to create those jobs, the project reports, and also there's a construction consultant that visits the project every 3 months and reports that they're actually doing. This is not a requirement by the new act, but we have been doing this, and it is tremendously well perceived by investors because it's just they know, okay, I invested that money and I'm getting reports about how it's being used on a quarterly basis. I think these are all added layers to make these individuals feel better because our investors now are very sophisticated investors. They want to know how this investment is going and when they're going to get their money, how much safety there is, etc. So with that, let me ask you this question. Okay, I'm interested now. I would like to do it. What do I do? What kind of a timeline am I looking at in EB5? You kind of hinted on a couple of points about the timing, but for me, because there are some words also, one of the questions is that, oh, this takes 8 years. But this is not when you get your rights. Maybe the entire package takes about that, but this is not when you start enjoying it. So can you just describe the process a little bit? Either of you, I mean, Abi, you've been helping clients every day now. Maybe you just walk them through in a kind of simplistic manner.
I can talk about the regional center side, and then Rohit maybe can address the filing side and the timelines with USCIS. So I think both attorneys and regional center staff works, together to put together a great petition. If someone's interested, they reach out to the regional center. It's a requirement of the law that they complete an investor questionnaire in order to receive the documents about a project. We cannot force an investor to go into a particular project. It is their choice, and they get all the information regarding the project. So that is something really important because people feel that it's a model like it's a big fund and they put their money in it, and then we choose in what project their money is going into. So that's not the case. You choose a project, and if you like it, then only remit the funds. So that's one thing on the regional center side. So it's like a proper offering document, which looks like a mutual fund offering with all the risk disclosures, description of the project, etc. So first step, complete an investor questionnaire, receive the documents, do due diligence on those docs, either with your attorney or some other advisor. And once you're comfortable is when you invest capital. Now, to get to the point of investing capital, you have to work with an attorney. And I guess Rohit mentioned that a lot of source of funds work is required, that all the funds that are being invested need to be documented. One of the reasons why I moved from the lawyer side to the regional center side, because I got tired of doing that. And then I guess, Rohit, you can describe the process of, hey, I'm interested, I'm an investor. I call your firm or email you, what happens next?
So there fundamentally, once you've made the decision and you've gone with the fund and the regional center, there are 3 major steps in the EB5 process. If you are here in the country on a temporary non-immigrant basis, such as the L, the H, the F, the opportunity you have is to combine step 1 and step 2 together. And that is, step 1 is we file the I-526E application. This application is where we are sourcing your money and we are watching how you earn the money and how you acquired it. And then we're watching how you remit it downstream into the fund. And then we're filing the EB5 application once the capital's in and you've done all the appropriate subscriptions. Step 2, after we do that, and if you are here in the US concurrently while we do the 526E, we would file for the adjustment of status. Adjustment of status being we file for your work authorization, we file for your travel card, and we file for the conditional green card. So that timeline to do all of it together really depends on the investor. Some investors are able to get everything together and secure their investment opportunity within a matter of 3-4 weeks. Some investors take a lot longer. The fastest 526E I've ever done in my career was 6 days. I never want to do that again. It was hell. So most people are in the element of probably the 4 to 5 weeks because it does take a long time. And the reason, by the way, we did it on that 6 days is because we had an age out case. So that's where a derivative was going to be turning 21. So depending on what the investor's motivations are and how quickly they move, the attorney is going to move just as quickly. So let's assume that someone starts the process on December 1st. Probably by January middle, they should be in a position where the money is already in the project. They've filed a 526E, and then if they're here in the US, we filed for the concurrent status. So from January 15th, then the clock starts. You've done step 1 and step 2. We are assuming with that example that sometime in July, August of 2023, you would be getting your work authorization. That's, got the first card. Then sometime around January 15th or February 15th of 24, you would get your travel card. The actual 526E application just continues to pen. We are making the assumption that it's going to take somewhere around 2 to 2.5 years for that first application, the 526E, to come through. So if we use our example, we are assuming sometime around January of 2025, the person has gotten their 526E, but of course, in August of 23, they had the work authorization, and January of 24, they had the travel. So you're getting all of these cards in together. And then if we keep with that same example, the actual I-45, which is a conditional green card, comes very shortly after the 526E. So in this sort of hypothesis, sometime by March or April of 2024, you have a conditional 2-year green card. So that green card you keep for 2 years, from March of 25 to sometime around March of 27. And then we apply for the final step, which is the 829 to remove conditions. So that timeline, Aaron, that you mentioned of 8 years, 10 years, that is not applicable because the person has that ability to work and travel within about a year, and they get their conditional green card within around 2.5 years. So I'm not quite sure where some folks are getting that disjointed view that you referenced earlier.
That's fantastic. And what happens, maybe Abhi, what happens if they get denied for some reason, their source of funds? I mean, at Golden Gate Global, we never had a project denial for over 1,300 investors. But if they, for some reason, USCIS has an issue with their source of funds, path of funds, etc., what happens?
So I guess the credible regional centers, they have this policy that there is a kind of like a denial repayment clause in the offering, where for reasons of, let's say, someone failed to explain their source of funds, unless there isn't a fraud and there is no foul play by the investor, we work hard and try to refund the investment proceeds within 90 days. In some cases, we look for an alternate investor and then repay the funds. In some other cases, when you can't find an alternate investor because the jobs are already created, then we have a set aside of capital from which we can repay the investors.
And Rohit, we talked about source and path of funds just now. How can they source it? Like, for example, can I liquidate some of my funds here in the US? Can I get the rest from my family? Can I just sell a home and do this? How does it work? Like, can you give maybe 1 or 2 very frequent examples that are applicable to folks that are maybe living, working, or studying here in the US?
Yeah. So for those who are working here in the US, a very common scenario is they have accumulated funds here, US tax paid income. Sometimes they have refinance of homes if you're in the Bay Area or some of those other markets where your home skyrocket in value, you've got that refinance opportunity. And then they get the balance from parents back home in India. So in that scenario, we have essentially two distinct sources of funds. And within those source of funds, you've got sort of sub-sources, if you will. So in that scenario, what we'll do is I always do a kickoff with the client. We do a little back and forth. I ask a ton of questions. And then on that basis, we kind of flow it through. So a very simple, straightforward, question I would say is, all right, if you were liquidating $800,000 in a Bank of America account today, where would it come from, right? So if you say I've got some mutual funds sitting at Fidelity, I will go into Fidelity. I'll start tracking that. If you said you have some stock options that you're selling, then I would go look at the employment composition. And then if you say I've got money coming from mom and dad back home, if you're an F1 or even an H1, then we go to mom and dad's accounts and their capital to see how we can source that. So the goal is we're looking at our burden of proof, which is it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. Is it more reasonable than not? The government wants to know that is it more reasonable than not that Mr. or Mrs. Investor got their capital through legitimate means, and that capital, that full entire 800,000 is now being deployed into this particular project. So that's our burden. In some instances, it's very straightforward. In some instances, it's extremely complicated. What I do tell clients, though, is let's try and simplify as much as possible. The reason not necessarily for my benefit, but more for the benefit of the adjudicator. You want to make this particular adjudicator comfortable that, yes, this is coming from straightforward means and everything behind it is legitimate. The more sort of topsy-turvy and 50 different corners you take, the more complicated.
And to add to what Rohit just said, I think an attorney's job is not only to document source of funds, but identify the best source that USCIS will understand. A lot of times I used to come across investors who had already liquidated their investments without even realizing the standard that USCIS looks at for documenting them. And that's a big no-no. Any attorney you speak with will tell you, first, let me identify your source that is passable in front of USCIS, and then liquidate it versus liquidate it and then you come to me. It's too late at that point. It could be, those funds could be useless. The second thing I'd like to point out is that laws of the country where funds are originating also matter. If you take a home equity line of credit in the United States and fund your EB5 investment, that's easy. That's actually golden. It's super easy. But if you take a loan against property in India and try to remit it, it's against laws of India. That could be a really bad way of funding your EB5 investment. So it's just a lot of things need to be balanced, and an attorney's job is to identify the best source to fund your investment.
Let me ask one of the questions that came up. What triggers the eligibility for US citizenship? When can my days towards citizenship eligibility start in the picture of the EB5?
From start of conditional residency. So if somebody attains conditional residency, let's say in our example, March, April of 2025, then 60 months moving forward, assuming that they're present in the United States majority of the time, that's out of the 60 months, 31 months out of 60, then they're eligible. Of course, there are other considerations where even if you file, but then your last application, the 829, has not yet been approved, the application sort of sits with the government while they're waiting to make sure you are eligible for legal permanent residency. But in most cases, that's not an issue. So it's theoretically speaking, if we keep that timeline and somebody is maintaining status, they're not treating the green card like a B1, B2 visa, which is a big no-no. Don't do that. Don't think you're going to spend 6 months of the year, in India, come in here for a couple of weeks and then go back. Just don't do that. Then you'll be eligible.
I think you're breaking off a little, but let me kind of, for the sake of the conversation towards the end, let me summarize this. And Avi, correct me if I'm wrong. So I understand the EB-5 program is not for everyone, but it works magic for the folks who are eligible, and especially the ones that are currently in the US and have the liquidity to be able to finance something like that. It is also a great opportunity, as far as I understand, for individuals who have this time limit or kind of a deadline looming of any related to any layoffs or any restructuring or anything like that. And it's an opportunity for them to change their status, especially given the new law. I understand that this investment is for like at risk, but the main exposures are the job creation for the immigration purpose and the repayment of funds, which is the solidity of the project, underlying project. So if all these check out and the due diligence is well done, this is fairly safe approach, especially with the added measures that we talked about of the RIA. And it's a relatively safe investment opportunity and immigration opportunity for a lot of individuals who can benefit from this. So is this a fair statement? Is there anything that you'd like to add to this kind of a conclusion?
Yeah, so I think my approach to EB-5 is that it's not about EB-5, it is about the green card. And I think there's a night and day difference between being on a non-immigrant visa and a green card. And if you can get it, if your spouse is a citizen, you get it through that. Or if, through EB2, EB3, whatever way you reach a green card, it's the end that matters. And I think for most people who are here on H-1B or F-1, EB-5 happens to be the means to that end, which is a green card. And if someone can afford it, I think it is the fastest way. If you do it right and partner with the right organization, it is also a safe way of doing that. Of course, there's a loss of opportunity cost on that investment because your ROI in monetary terms is low, but your real ROI is getting that green card and the certainty and the opportunities that come with that.
Thank you. And Rohit, do you have anything else to add? You're muted right now.
Yeah, I think there is a certain amount of responsibility that comes with the underlying conditional green card, right? So as I said, don't treat it like a B1, B2. Don't treat it as a ability to travel in and out of the country with some level of frequency. And then also consider the tax implications. So I think Abhi had mentioned at the start that if an individual does not wish to reside here on some permanent basis, then this is not the right fit for them. So when somebody takes all of this into account and is willing to put that capital at risk, obviously, and we're using the term risk. So let's be clear. Risk it's a legal term. There's a requirement. It doesn't mean that the project is risky. It just has risk, like any type of investment, whether you are, working with a stockbroker or the like. They're always going to warn you that investing in this particular company in this market, you may see ups, you may see downs. Same level. This is private equity. So if you choose wisely and you work with the right team, this is a very, very good way to secure yourself against a lot of the issues that we're now seeing within the employment space.
Thank you, gentlemen. Both of you, I very much appreciate this conversation. I think that was very informative. I